This is Travis from Darkest Hour, and you're watching Richard Metal Fan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 256 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews, calling from Zoom, and I'm here with Travis from the almighty Darkest Hour. How are you doing today, Travis? Thanks for coming on.
I'm pretty well, getting over some parting tour sickness, but aside from that, I cannot complain.
That's awesome, man. So, pretty much the format of the show is I want to talk about like your musical history and sort of talk about like your the rundown of your discography, but take you back to young Travis Orbin. So, kind of growing up, what were the first bands that got you into metal, and what made you want to start playing the drums?
Pretty easy answer there, Metallica.
Yeah.
I vividly recall seeing the video for Enter Sandman when that album was released, which was 91, which would have made me 8 years old, 9 years old. And so that struck me. I really enjoyed that, and my father actually really liked the record as well. And we would ride around in his truck in the neighborhood and listen to it. And that was my initial, um, and that was my introduction into heavier music, let's say. I got into heavier stuff in the mid '90s. I had a group of friends, a group of miscreants who were into stuff like Sepultura, however you say it, and Pantera. But 91, that was the Black Album. That was my introduction. And then from there, I took it upon myself to discover more of this mysterious Metallica band, and I went backwards in their discography, which is the only way you could go at the time. And I on a whim purchased Injustice for All, and that was the record that actually made me want to become a drummer.
Yeah, that's and Just for All is still a classic album, even though a lot of people bitch about like the production and the lack of bass.
Yeah, I actually attempted to listen to the reimagined Injustice for All, where they just boosted that bass frequency and
Yeah. Yeah, it's like somebody made like a fan made version of it with the bass turned up. It's called like Injustice for Jason.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And Jason is a killer bassist, but it's just they got it right the first time. It's like how the record should be heard.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the only way you can listen to that is just through that fan made version. I mean, nothing against the original, but I just like hearing like the bass and like how because without bass it's just like it feels like just hollow sounding.
Well, that's kind of the appeal of the record. Like it's supposed to be it is their coldest record. It sounds like closer to how modern metal sounds today. Like I'm pretty sure Meshuggah has cited that record as kind of being an archetype for their own production. So obviously, you know, recording production is miles ahead now, but there's something to be said about that sort of blueprint and what they attempted to do. And you could look at it as a failure, but from a production side of things. But like I said, I think that record is meant to be is meant to sound that way, and it's just strange hearing it any other way at this point.
Yeah, I especially love like I think Lars was at his peak on the drumming with that album, especially like some of the double bass parts that he does on like Blackened and one was that sort of like one of the first like songs you tried to learn to play on drums.
Um, I can't recall the first song I actually tried to play. I didn't start playing along to the radio until I don't know, a few months into having my first drum set, and I was just playing along to local rock radio stations, so whatever came on at the time. And so I don't have a as vivid of a recollection as like the first song that I tried to play to. But I didn't try playing to any of the Injustice for All material until I got a double bass pedal. And I don't remember being particularly successful at those endeavors.
Nice. And so a lot of people will know you from Darkest Hour and a bunch of other bands. Like I'm just curious, like your bands like before, but long before that because I always like to hear the in-depth of that.
Well, I was in a several bands with my friend Taylor Larson, which there's kind of a through line with them because he went on to be he left playing music and went on to be a producer engineer, and he's actually done two of the Darkest Hour records, self-titled and our newest, Perpetual Terminal. And we were in a few different bands and side projects in our scene here. We had like a little microcosm of a music scene, which really reflected what was going on with like the early metalcore and stuff like that. And from there, I stopped playing with people around me, and I just kind of focused on myself for a bit. And on a whim, I just kind of checked in on this band that I knew about called Periphery,
Oh,
who
wow.
uh, they actually added us on MySpace, a band that Taylor and I were in a couple of years prior. And I remember thinking like this is pretty interesting stuff. And I wanted to see if they had a drummer at this point. And they did, but one thing led to another. I've told the story a bunch, but
Yeah.
one thing led to another. I ended up being in the band for a couple of years.
Yeah,
And
because I had no idea you were in Periphery, right? Because not a lot of people know that.
yeah, as as we get further away from my tenure in the band, it becomes kind of a lesser known fact, I guess. But yeah, I was in that band for a couple of years. I didn't make any official recordings with them, but I wrote a lot of drum parts, which I then documented. I have a home studio, and so I like filmed and recorded myself playing the parts that I wrote over the music that was written at the time. And so anyway, from that band, I joined another band called Sky Eats Airplane, which is on Equal Vision Records, and I did an EP with them and a couple of tours. And then from there, I did a really small little project called Of Legends, which is with a guy. It was spearheaded by a guy named Louis DeBook, who now does a pop project called Mystery Skulls. I played on their record called Stranded um, as a session musician, and then he wanted me to join the band. He asked me to join the band. At that time, Sky It's Airplane had dissipated into really nothing, and we were on a sort of unannounced hiatus. So I did two tours of Love Legends, and then kind of uh, you know strode off into the sunset and
Yeah.
just did session work out of my home studio for a couple of years until Darkest Hour started renting a B room out of Taylor's studio at the time. And
Yeah.
then Taylor was like, you should they were looking for a drummer. They were working with a guy, but they weren't quite sold on him being the new member, the new drummer. So Taylor was like, you should jam with my friend Travis. And then that's how that happened.
Yeah.
So that was 2011. And I jammed with him a few times, did a few gigs, and then we made it official in 2013.
Yeah. But I know like before that you did the Gabrielle construct. You did that album Interior City in 2013, which was like the year before your first record with Darkest Hour. Tell me about that because I was listening to it. It's just very proggy sounding.
Yeah, Gabe is a good friend of mine. He contacted me. It was totally happenstance how it all came about because he had started. Well, he was kind of local. He was based out of Salisbury, Maryland, which is about a 40-minute drive kind of west of here where I reside. And even though he was so close, like he wasn't a part of the scene that Taylor and I were in years prior. And he had started putting together his debut record, the material that would become Interior City, the record that you heard. And I think he went to a dentist appointment, and the dentist recommended an engineer who had been a part of a few bands in the music scene that Taylor and I were in. And he had just struck out to be his own boss, be his own, produce and engineer records. And he had a space in Salisbury. And because he knew me, he recommended me to Gabe as the drummer for the project. So I got a hold of Gabe, or Gabe got a hold of me, and I think it was 2011, and I started sort of doing what I do with session work, just like taking the established drum arrangements and hopefully improving them, adding my own idiosyncrasies. And then I tracked that record in it's like the beginning of 2012, and it came out the following year. And yeah, his music, Gabe is he is probably, out of all the people that I know, all the musicians, all the non-musicians, he's probably listened to the most music out of anyone. And it shows up in his music in not stark ways, but just interesting ways. And he has a little bit of everything in there. There's a classical influence, there's progressive, there's jazz, there's metal, and every flavor in between. And what else can I say about it? I don't know. I still have fond memories of being part of that record, and I love the way it came out.
Yeah. Is there any plan to do like more with Gabe, or you're just like your main focus right now is with Darkest Hour?
Well, I'm always working, always doing sessions, working on my own solo music, and I've actually worked on and off with Gabe on future Gabriel Construct material since that record came out. Like we literally started in 2013 doing tracks out of my home studio, and I've done a bunch of random assorted stuff since then, just kind of sporadically over the years. Um, he's also, I don't know if this is still a priority for him, but he wanted to redo Interior City with I took the drums, and rather than beat detecting them, I manually edited them so that they have more push and pull. And he wanted to recut all the vocals and maybe some of the other instruments. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if it's still a priority, but he was considering redoing Interior City. But aside from that, we've been working on new material for upcoming Gabriel Contract releases for over a decade at this point. So you can definitely expect a lot of new stuff.
Nice. But tell me about how you ended up joining Darkest Hour because you joined in 2013.
Yeah, like I said, we jammed in 2011, but uh, well, I guess I could tell a story about that. I came in, I set up my drums. I had sort of learned how to play two songs from the Human Romance, which was the newest record at the time, and I still needed my charts because I had rehearsed them like that day or maybe the day before, so I was still on chart, but I could play through it, just set up a music stand, and I set up my drums in this B room, and I was like, "Can we play through the material 40 BPM slower, and then 20, and then performance tempo? It'll help me warm up." And they had never done anything like that. They had actually never played live with a drummer who used a click before. So this was a totally foreign experience, not only to do that, but do it, play their own material like slower. It was just kind of strange,
Yeah.
but we did it. And then of course we ran through it at performance tempo, and they really liked it, and they liked that little process, but they also liked me as a person and how I played. So they kind of took note of the situation, and then we met a few months later in 2012. I want to say maybe March of 2012. We got together in November of 2011, and we had our first pre-production session. We tried writing music, and it worked out pretty well. I think we did like 6 or 7 songs. We recorded them, and a couple of those actually in a different form, of course. They ended up making the self-titled record. And we did that a few times throughout 2012. And then I had my first gig in, I think it was November of 2012. It was the California Metal Fest. And then we did one or two more little weekend warrior things. And then they announced me as the permanent, new drummer in May 2013. It was just before we went on tour with Killswitch Engage. We were not direct support, but we were support for that tour.
Nice. And so when you ended up joining Darkest Hour, were you like listening to like the like previous albums like Deliver Us, Human Romance, Undoing Ruin and be like I need to play like this? Or did like Mike and John and everybody in the band wanted you to sort of like bring like your own kind of like style into Darkest Hour?
I was not terribly familiar with their material. In fact, a lot of the songs that I transcribed and learned from my first gig, I was hearing, for the first time. So I was probably playing them a little closer to how they were performed. But obviously, over the years, I've taken liberties and kind of put my own stamp on it. And they've never objected to that at all. Like if anything, they want me to stretch out a little more probably.
Yeah. But tell me about making your first record with the band, the self-titled. And this year does mark 10 years of the self-titled album. So what was sort of like the thought process and the whole recording like for you, being that this was like your first record with the band?
Well, like I said, we started in March of 2012, and we would just meet in this one B room in actually the same studio that we made the record, and we would just hash out ideas. And I remember not as much Guitar Pro on that record. Um, Typically, what we do nowadays, I'll enter the room and they'll have it set up so where I just press the space bar and I can hear the demo. And they usually have like program drums, and I'll just chart the arrangement and then come up with parts on the fly. We'll jam the song. Mike Schleibaum, the other guitarist and one of the founding members of the band, he will take down the demo, and then I'll then listen to the demo later and transcribe what I played in the Guitar Pro and revise from there. That process wasn't quite as determined back then. It was more pre-production of anything. So we would get in a room, throw up some mics, um, I'll chart the song and I'll come up with parts and you know tweak as we go along. And it was more of that, but I guess the thing I want to emphasize most, it was very organic, and that's something I had grown unaccustomed to almost because the bands that Taylor and I were in, we wrote everything organically, but there was a period of time where it was a lot of just people sending me files, online and trying to make sense out of it. And then of course I do that with session work as well. So to like be in a room and re-experience that was quite a treat. And so once we felt like the record was ready, then we just went next door to Taylor and it was synced up our calendars and set aside a time and did it. And I started tracking the drums, and it was the summer of 2013. It was after we got home from that Killswitch tour. It was like late summer, early autumn. And then they worked on it throughout the rest of the year, and then it was released, I think, while we were on Mayhem Fest tour of 2014.
Nice. And did you wanted to also try to bring something new rhythmically to Darkest Hour that they didn't have previously?
So that's what's interesting. There was a lot of a little bit of argumentation, but a lot of just general back and forth between like what because Taylor was more in my corner pulling for me to express myself more through the band, and the band wasn't used to like some of these kind of more, I guess, syncopated drum patterns and fills and stuff. And so Taylor was he had to pull for me for in a few occasions to like I'm trying to think of a song in particular. Let me pull up the track list.
I also have it right here.
Mm, I can almost read it.
I
I
have to hold it closer. Sorry about the glare right there.
think it's yeah, I think Departure is probably a good example. Um there's kind of a bouncy like Bonham-esque groove in the chorus.
Which is like the good. I think it's like a good way to like end the album since it was the last song on here.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that used that sort of kind of almost hip hop-ish uh drum groove actually just used to be just straight 16th double kick. And then Taylor was like, dude, just do something, I don't know, do something more interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's an example of like the band kind of it's not like they were reticent to, release the reins, but they just had to get accustomed to like, okay, there's a new voice in the band, and it's pretty there's a stark contrast.
Yeah. And being at this was self-titled because usually when a band does like a self-titled album, it's always like the first. But when I see it like sort of later in their career, I always feel like it's like a new chapter or a new start for a band. Was that what was sort of like the reason for this album being self-titled?
That's an apt assumption, I'd say, because they had a new drummer. I'm a much different player than Ryan Parrish was, and we were on a new record label. Um, yeah, it was a sort of reinvention, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely feel like this album is sort of like a fresh new start. It sounds like different from like the previous albums. Like it sort of has like the metalcore style, but also a little bit of the melodic death metal a bit at times, which I kind of like the song like the especially like Departure, but also songs like Great Oppressor and even Wasteland is just very groove sounding. But I just feel like with the self-titled, it's always like a new sort of like invigoration for the band.
Hmm. Yeah, again, fair to say, and that probably also played into the titling of the record. The fact that we were branching out a bit more and trying some different approaches,
Yeah.
which would end up self-rebelling against with Godless, where we just wanted to be as heavy and brutal as we could be.
Yeah. And then I know you also mentioned that you do session work because in 2015 you tracked drums for The Dying of the Light by Amidst the Withering, who are actually from my home state of Georgia. So tell me about like how you worked with those guys on that album.
That's interesting. Yeah. So, I've never talked to him in person or on the phone or anything. It's all been internet correspondence. So, if I say his name wrong, I apologize. But I guess it's Serge. He had this solo project that I did session drums for in it was a while ago. I want to say like 2011, and he changed the name. And I'm gonna have to pull up my little discography here. He changed the name at one point, and I'm definitely not going to be able to pronounce this. It's like Hiraethum, Hiraethum. But
I think
anyway,
it's
I
Pyrathium.
Hiraethum. Okay, so I did his session for that, his solo project in 2011 or thereabouts, and then he had this other project with a singer, which was Amidst the Withering. And because of our, rapport doing that project, he approached me for Amidst. And interesting story about that after the fact. I actually film all of my takes for my sessions, and then I synchronize them with the final mix master, and then post on my YouTube channel. And that's like pretty sure it's like the only session work I've ever done where the video was like flagged, and I can't do anything about it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I used to have that full record. I had that full record on my YouTube channel for a while. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the story behind that.
Yeah. Then kind of going back to Darkest Hour, or which is the next album, Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora. I thought that was a really good album. So what was that like going from the self-titled to Godless Prophets? Did you feel like more comfortable being this was like your second record? Did you like contribute more than what you did on the self-titled?
Yeah, certainly I felt like they were more cognizant of my abilities and what I could bring creatively to the table. So I definitely stretched out a bit more. And our guitarist that we had at the time, Michael Kerrigan, he was obviously more trustful of my abilities and such. So we did a lot of Guitar Pro on that record. He would send me at times like complete songs in Guitar Pro with just a guitar, two guitar voices, and then I would write the drums from scratch. And so yeah, I felt felt like my what I contributed was a little more welcome at that point.
Nice. Nice. And of course, like the album was actually crowdfunded on Indiegogo. So what made you guys decide to like crowdfund the album?
So we had a deal with Sumerian for one record and an option, and then we chose to part ways after the record and raise the money on our own. It seemed to be something that more bands were doing at the time. I don't know if they still are. They probably are, but it seemed like a particularly, I don't want to say safe, but unrisky venture or endeavor. So we did that, and we raised, I think, like well over what our goal was, which was really cool. And I forget what the question was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I
It,
commenting on the fact that it was that we did that, or am I answering something in particular? I forget.
just like what made you guys decide to like do it in general.
We just we just wanted to do we wanted complete creative control, basically.
Right. And then you also do some more session work because I know you did a couple singles with the harp machine. Tell me about that because you did like three singles, The Nader, The Elder, and Bleak.
I actually did the whole record. I have no idea if it's ever going to see the light of day.
Yeah. Yeah, because those are like the only singles that are out now, but I don't think that there's only like one full length that came out in 2012, The Disclosure.
Mhm. I think it's I have it on my website. It's either 8 or 10 songs that I did. Let me see here. 10 songs.
Yeah. So we've only heard like 30% of it.
Hmm.
Yeah. But kind of like want to talk about the latest Darkest Hour album, Perpetual Terminal, is absolutely kick-ass. One of my favorite albums from this year so far. So how was the writing and recording process like for this?
Well, we started shortly after Godless, and we had a few scattered pre-production sessions, and then Michael Kerrigan left the band, and we had a pandemic, and then we had to find a new guitarist. So that, those events obviously set us back quite a bit, and then we got this really talented guy named Nico Santora, and then we had to figure out, is he a fit for us musically and personally. So we did some kind of weekend warrior stuff with him and had some writing sessions, and he fit in really well. I think it's just a testament to his talent because he can write a lot of different styles of music, but he knew the musical language of the band well, and he contributed pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. And did he bring in something like new to Darkest Hour that y'all didn't have like before?
Um, I don't know. I'm hesitant to say exactly. I mean, he's so good at kind of not disguising himself, but just like I said, he knew the language of the band, and he was able to add something to it that fits within uh, the oeuvre of the band, but also kind of speaks to his own identity.
But with this out with the Perpetual Terminal, did you wanted to continue in sort of like the same vein as Godless Prophets of the Migrant Four, or did you wanted to try something new or different that Darkest Hour hasn't done before?
I'd say those trying new things or consciously going with a certain approach, those were more prioritized with the previous two records. With this, we just wanted to write good songs and incorporate Nico along the way. And I think it kind of just organically happened that this record is I think it straddles the line perfectly between self-titled and Godless. And again, it happened very organically.
Yeah. Yeah, and for you, what sort of like stands out with Perpetual Terminal as sort of like the new Darkest Hour album?
Um, I think it's a I think it's a very complete listen. I think you hear like every side of the band, at least the incarnation of the band as it stands today. And there's acoustic material. There's obviously the thrashy stuff. There's the more, I guess, American sounding metal. uh, and then there's ballady things. like I said, I think it reflects every side of the band and what we're capable of at this moment, at least.
Right.
I've heard I've heard people several comments echoed that it's like a journey, and I really like that.
Yeah. And how do you feel like Darkest Hour has changed over the years, even when you, even like before you were in the band to even like when after you joined, either as a group or in terms of like the sound of the band?
I think we've matured in the sense that we're better and more efficient at what we do. That's probably a bland answer, but I can't think of anything else or any other way to phrase it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then moving through sort of like because I know Darkest Hour is part of like the whole new wave of American heavy metal in like the early to mid 2000s, along with like Chimera, Shadows Fall, Killswitch Engage, and Bleeding Through. And I feel like there's also a certain energy within that scene as it was expanding. So how do you feel about like that whole like scene in general, and how do you feel like how it was then versus how it is like today and what has changed?
Unfortunately, I don't really feel versed enough to make a comment on that, because it's not really, even though the band that I'm in now was a part of that that development. I wasn't particularly cognizant of it at the time, and I don't know. My musical interests they lie elsewhere, and so it's hard for me to make a comment, a reflection of the past versus now. Um, but it seems that I don't know if there's a resurgence or just a renewal or just a continued interest. But a lot of those bands are still touring, so we're fortunate for that.
Right. And with a perpetual terminal, no, for you, did you want to try to do something new on the drums that you haven't done before in terms of like different like patterns, different beats and stuff?
Not consciously. Again, just trying to write the best songs that we could. But I guess one interesting thing that I could comment on is that there's actually some pretty lengthy moments that are on the record that previously were just completely improvised. For instance, in the song "One with the Void," um, I guess it would be the choruses. The first two choruses were just completely improvised in the pre-production, and then I later transcribed the parts and learned them and recorded them for the record as they were when I originally improvised them. I also did that with the closing song. A lot of the crazy drum parts at the end there were all improvised originally.
Yeah. And I think that was like a great way to end the album.
Thanks.
Yeah. And of course, being a drummer, usually the drummer's job is to like keep the tempo and the beat. Otherwise, it'll turn into just a complete bloodbath. But as a drummer, do you usually need to hear sort of like what the guitars are doing in order to lay down your parts, or do you usually have like a whole drum track like written and everything, and the rest of the band can write over that?
I'm the way this band works, it's very guitar oriented, so I very much appreciate having the full picture, as many instruments in it as possible. I even like to sometimes tailor parts to what the vocals are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever worried that you hear like a riff and then you have like a different like drum pattern and you ever worried like how off time it sounds?
No, because then I'll just adjust it. Sometimes, those sorts of counterpoint figures can sound pretty hip.
Nice. And then sort of like the final question I want to ask you is still talking about drums. I'm always curious like what's like your drum setup in terms of like what drums you play, sticks, pedal, cymbals and all that stuff.
I endorse Pearl drums, Zildjian cymbals, Vic Firth sticks, Remo drum heads, Vratum shoes, and Artom Corporation. They make the moon gels, the little like things that sit on the drums that are sticky and mute them. They're commonly blue, but you can also get them in clear. I think that's all my endorsements. Oh, and
Nice.
E-pad practice pads. So yeah.
Yeah. That's nice, Travis. So, kind of like in the end to sort of wrap things up, what's next for Darkest Hour? Have you got any more like tours lined up in support of Perpetual Terminal?
We are entertaining offers for the summer, but that door is quickly closing. We may have a little jaunt in the autumn, and then we're more than likely going to have a European tour in the late autumn going into the winter, which should be announced pretty soon.
Nice. So, thank you, Travis, for this conversation. It's great to finally have Darkest Hour on my show. There's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching this to close this out?
Thanks for listening. And if you attended a show on our tour that just concluded, many thanks for the support for coming out, and thank you kindly.
Awesome. So, everybody, Travis Orbin from Darkest Hour. See you next time.